had a certain philosophy from the Greek poets, from Plato and others, which they took to extreme levels. But essentially what Gnosticism was based on is the idea that matter is inherently corrupt. You know, the Jews and the Christians believed that when God created the heavens and the earth, that he made everything good. But Gnostics believed that matter and physical substance was inherently evil. We know as Christians that the reason evil exists in the world is not because matter is causing evil. It's because people have chosen to rebel against God. What God made was very good. There's a curse on the earth. The earth is broken. Creation is broken because of mankind. But matter, what God created, is not bad and is not evil. But the Gnostics believed that it was. And so everything that they taught came out of that basic frame of reference. And so to a Gnostic, the idea of resurrection was anathema. Why would you want to be resurrected in order to come back in a body of flesh? Because being in a body of flesh is a prison to a Gnostic. Being in this material creation is a prison to a Gnostic. So what was the Gnostic idea? What was their ideal? Our brother said that the Gnostics were Chilias, that is millennialists. That is absolutely not true. They were the opponents of Chilias. In fact, Irenaeus and Justin and all those apologists for the Christian faith who refuted the Gnostics, who wrote almost all that we know about the Gnostics, were all premillennialists. And I can prove that. The Gnostics were the opponents of premillennialism, or Chiliasm as it was called. Gnosticism taught a heavenly destiny. Plato taught that man's destiny was to shed this physical substance of matter and to get out of this prison of this creation and ascend through these heavenly spheres. Plato taught that the earth was the center of the universe and that all the planets and the sun and the moon were part of a crystal-type sphere, and these spheres were one inside the other, and they were turning one and the other and carrying the planets and the sun and the moon around the earth. That's what Plato taught. And Plato taught that, which is where Gnosticism really comes from, Plato taught that man's destiny was to escape the creation, to escape a physical body, and to ascend one sphere at a time as he accumulated more philosophy and more knowledge, to ascend through these spheres until finally he reached pure spirit, where there was no more matter, and there he could join with what they called the pleroma, which is the Greek word for fullness. This is what Plato taught. The Gnostics had this very same idea, and they took Christianity and they interpreted it based on Gnosticism, based on Gnostic presuppositions. And this is where the idea of a heavenly destiny came from. It didn't come from the scriptures. It came from Plato, and it came from the Gnostics. They are the ones who denied the resurrection. They are the ones who denied that the physical creation would be the place of the inheritance of God's people when he restored it and made it good like it was at the very beginning. It was the Gnostics who did that. And it was the Gnostics who took the scriptures that talk about all these things throughout the Old Testament and said they don't mean what they say. They're talking about some other thing. In fact, Origen, who was a Christian Gnostic, if you will, is the guy who brought that right into mainstream Christianity. Origen is the guy who did that. Origen said that Plato's heavenly spheres, when Jesus said, "In my Father's house are many mansions, I go to prepare a place for you," that he was talking about Plato's heavenly spheres. Origen said that. Jesus was basically not referencing the Hebrew prophets. He was an apologist for Plato. This is what Origen taught. Origen taught that the saint's destiny is heaven. Origen taught that. He was one of the very first to have taught that in Christianity. The apologists and the martyrs before Origen believed that the destiny of Christians was the promise that God made to Abraham. I gave you one quote, and I told you where you can find a whole lot more. Look up Irenaeus' works Against Heresies, book 5. It's about the last 10 chapters in that. He gives detailed explanations of what the early Christians believed. And it had nothing to do with flying away to heaven and living forever after there.
is ktissis, it's creation. It has nothing to do with the earth. So the creation in verse 19 is ktissis. The word earth is, I think, dawn or something like that.
It's Gay. G. Gay.
Eos.
Yeah. Now, we're imprisoned in the planet Earth, and we're imprisoned in the universe. We're subject to time, space, matter. Right now, we're tired, we're weary, we're groaning, not only on the earth's groaning, we're groaning, because we're desiring to be clothed upon with our body from heaven. And so the ktissis, this is the whole universe.